Hello and welcome to the oVirt 2021 conference. We have a lot of good content for you, starting with features that were developed only this year and news and 10 years of oVirt. For this conference panel, we have Martin and Simon from Red Hat and Oracle, the two companies who are distributing oVirt commercially. We have Nir from the trenches of oVirt development, who's going to tell us something about storage. And we have Karsten, who's been there in the very first moment when oVirt went open source. If you want to participate in this conference, please use the commenting function here on YouTube. And of course, for the coming talks, the speakers have taken the time. They're here to answer your questions. And with that, I'm handing over to Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Janos. As already introduced, I'm working for Reddit, but I'm also an oVirt board member, and in that function, I'm just going through some of the 10 years of oVirt and the recent features and a little bit about the future. So, from an agenda perspective, what we have is a little bit of oVirt history, where we have another talk later on. Then a little bit about the two commercial distributions we have, Red Hat Virtualization and Oracle Virtualization, the recent changes, and a little bit about the future, as already said. So starting with the history of oVirt, I believe everyone knows how oVirt is built. So in a nutshell, you're having the oVirt engine who is managing all the hypervisors who are logically divided into data centers. A data center means you have your own storage in each data center and multiple own networks there as well. And of course, you can cluster your hypervisors, and each cluster is a migration domain. Each hypervisor, of course, can run VMs, so it's like a normal classical virtualization system today. Yeah, when did it all start? It all started in 2005 when Cumbernet was founded and the predecessor of oVirt, Solid Ice, was released. Cumbernet also was the, I would say, inventor of KVM. So they started developing KVM, which is now the main type 1 hypervisor we have in the Linux area. In 2008, then, Red Hat acquired Cumbernet, and with that, the ground for oVirt, the open sourcing of Solid Ice was laid, which led to a oVirt 3.0 release in 2012, with more solution partners, the first RESTful API and memory over commitment as the main features. After 10 years of development of KVM, so in 2016, oVirt 4.0 was released with the new dashboard and the reworked UI. Personally, I believe everyone's already using oVirt 4.0 or even newer versions, so everyone probably just remembers the new UI, no longer the old one. In 2019, then, we got this second, commercial distribution and Oracle joining the oVirt community. That was when oVirt was more or less becoming 10 years old. The Red Hat virtualization, the Oracle virtualization is based on oVirt 4.2 in the initial release. And in 2020, we released the most recent oVirt 4.4, which is now based on CentOS Stream 8. So it's also using the most current operating systems we have. Karsten will later on have it talk about a little bit more on the history, as already announced by Janos. Okay, so now let's have a short look about the two commercial distributions we have. The first one, or the first company productizing oVirt, was Red Hat with the Red Hat virtualization product. As Red Hat did initiate the oVirt project and is still the most active member in the community, it's quite natural that they released the commercial distribution. Their initial version was released in 2009, and of course, Red Hat is still committed to oVirt and RAF, and the roadmap lifecycle for RAF itself, so for the commercial distribution, is currently committed until 2026. Red Hat, as said, is still the main sponsor of the oVirt project, and the hypervisor platform consisting of QEMU, KVM, and libvirt is a trusted, stable, and mature basis still that is actively being contributed to by Red Hat as well. As said, Red Hat is also, or as being one of the main contributors to oVirt, it's still also one of the main contributors to KVM, QEMU, and libvirt, with quite some components being actively run the maintainership there by Red Hat as well. Okay, and then we get to the Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, where I hand over to my colleague Simon Coter, who's working for Oracle, and will present a little bit about how Oracle sees the oVirt world.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, so yeah, as Martin said, my name is Simon Coter, and I work at Oracle as part of the product management team for Linux and virtualization. So as Martin already introduced, a couple of years ago, we had our first downstream release with Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager 4.2. Yeah, the important thing to know is that Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager is there for free, so everyone can download, update, and install for free Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager. The actual latest release is based on oVirt 4.3.10, and over there also we had different backports and fixes, obviously coming from updated or upstream release of oVirt. A couple of topics I would like to mention related to Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager is that in those couple of years, we introduced the Oracle Linux templates, and those are publicly available for free and are there in two different formats, so as an open virtualization archive, as well as a QCOW2 format. That said, lately, another quite interesting topic we had around Oracle Linux virtualization, as well as oVirt, because obviously all of those templates can also work on oVirt, is related to the Oracle database templates. So templates that also already contains the Oracle database software and can be deployed on top of oVirt or Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager. With OLVM, we also have a wide guest-OS support, so we support Oracle Linux, RHEL, CentOS, Ubuntu, SLES, and also Microsoft Windows. We also have our own Virtual drivers there. Yeah, the important thing to know is that the Oracle Linux virtualization is 100% compatible with oVirt, so we didn't fork. We work with the oVirt community. And there's no real change on oVirt. Yeah, the entire solution also include updated KVM user space components like QEMU and libvirt, as well as Red Hat. Also, Oracle is one of the main contributors on those two user space components for the KVM hypervisor, as well as obviously the Linux kernel. Yeah, and currently we are working on what will be the next Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager release that will be based obviously on the latest upstream oVirt 4.4. Yeah, that said, I'm going to hand over back to Martin, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with Red Hat and talking with the oVirt community.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So you now heard about two companies productizing oVirt. So the question is, are there any other companies willing to have a mature and stable virtualization product, management product? So the question is really, who wants to be next? We would love to have more companies participating in oVirt, and with that, getting a more vibrant developer community as well, of course. Anyways, to the recent changes, just summarized in a nutshell, so also quite short and brief. What we did with oVirt 4.4, we introduced the incremental backup API via change block tracking. So the normal way of having the backup vendors to request just the change blocks of the VMs to be backupped. With that, of course, reducing the complexity of the backup, reducing the amount of snapshots. But Nir will have this in his presentation on storage changes as well. With Red Hat moving to the let's say, cloud and KubeVirt as next generation virtualization tooling. We also introduced a connector to KubeVirt so that you have a converged view of KubeVirt and oVirt workloads within oVirt, and you can manage the KubeVirt workloads from there, start, stop, live migrate them as well. As already mentioned, the project moved to CentOS Stream 8, CentOS 8 for both the oVirt node and the oVirt engine. So we are all on the most recent CentOS versions now. And with that change, we also switched from Python 2 to Python 3 and did some other minor improvements on high performance VMs like enhanced NUMA pinning and automated CPU pinning. In addition, on the storage side, we had some more integrations like the CinderLib integration to be able to get Ceph storage more easily connected to oVirt. We added the SRIOV support for the vGPU side, MDEF vGPU for multiple vGPUs per VM, all that. So mostly the GPU drivers, unfortunately, are NVIDIA closed source drivers still. Intel is another one, by the way, who is doing MDEF, mediated devices, vGPU slicing. So instead of using closed source drivers, you could also go to an Intel card if that's suitable for you. We also introduced the Power 9 support. We had Power 8 before, and now with the changes of the platform of Power 9, we added Power 9 support, which is also probably the latest Power architecture, the last Power architecture we will support, just because IBM is moving with Power 10. They are moving to a must-have of Power VM virtualization, so there is no real place anymore for running oVirt on this platform, as it's would be kind of nesting. You would have a KVM running on a Power VM system, which is not really the main intention of oVirt. We introduced a new metrics framework to replace the old, if someone still remembers the old one we had with Jasper reports, which we needed to drop due to some licensing changes. And now that's called common logging. And of course, we improved the Ansel automation quite a bit. So as you see, lots of changes, still a very vibrant development going on. So that's still good. And I hope it'll stay this way for the next couple of years and decades. So finally, some thoughts on the future of oVirt. As I already mentioned, and you probably also know, Reddit is shifting its focus a little bit more to KubeVirt, which in turn means that the contributions, the amount of contributions from Red Hat will probably decrease a little bit, drain a little bit from what they are today. And as Red Hat being one of the most active members there, the oVirt community needs new community members for development and documentation to keep up the speed we are having today and not to slow down. And I believe that's also very important. So an ask to everyone, start being an active community member, not just by contributing the software and submitting bug reports, but also committing your first patches to the bugs you found, committing a patch to the first feature you need, some initial lines of code that can be reviewed and added to oVirt. So think about actively joining the community because you have more influence as well. You can move the project in the direction you need. You can get the features you need faster than just waiting for someone to implement them and say, oh, yes, that's important. We need that too. So really get to the community, try being an active member so that we keep oVirt as relevant as it is today. That said, overall, the world is changing. The infrastructure is changing. It does change a little bit away from the current way we see things, like virtualizing hardware, to more containerization and virtualization. The cloud really has become reality already. And with that, legacy virtualization is becoming less important than today, but it will never go away. And that's what you already see. If you look at all the other vendors providing virtualization solutions, so VMware is moving to containers. They're adding Tanzu to their classic VM management, which can manage containers as well. As I already said, Red Hat is moving to OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization, so being the Kubernetes and Kubernetes KubeVirt projects upstream, which is also containers and VMs in one platform. And OpenStack, on the other hand, is used as an infrastructure as a service solution underneath that you can easily deploy OpenShift container nodes on top of a VM, which shows you VMs are still important. And for oVirt to stay attractive, I believe, and that's just my oVirt board member mentor thoughts about this, that we also need new use cases here. We need to adapt to the new world and see what we can do to better fit into that changing infrastructure we are seeing today. And with that, we would also probably attract new users and developers, of course. So please, if you have any ideas, propose these new ideas and use cases, get involved, as I already said. Active provider, just with ideas of what can be done so that others can implement it. Join the mailing list discussions, be active, and ensure that oVirt has its place in the future as it has today. If you don't know how to participate, it's quite easy. It's on the oVirt homepage /community. So https ovirt.org/community. We are really hoping that you will take the opportunity and join the oVirt project right now, because I believe now is the right time to drive the changes forward and to influence the way oVirt will be in the future, because everything in the infrastructure world is changing right now, and as such, oVirt needs to. That said, this is my final statement from an oVirt board perspective, and hoping that we have and keep a vibrant oVirt community in the future. Thanks for listening and your attendance.
And vibrant it is indeed. We have so many questions in the chat. I hope we can get to all of them. So Martin, single sentence answers, please. Otherwise, we'll run out of time. But before we get to that, I want to say a thank you to Shal Ao in the chat, who is rebroadcasting this stream to the Chinese audience who can't visit YouTube. So big thank you for that. And we have a couple of questions. Some of them we'd better ask Nir, I think. We have one question from Bono, who's asking, with the end of life for CentOS, will it work with ROC in Alma Linux? And Sandro already answered that in the chat, that it's oVirt 4.8 is working with ROC in Alma or any other RHEL 8.4 clone. There are two questions. As part of the hyperconverged solution, is there a plan to replace Gluster with Ceph? Martin, do you have any answer to that question?
No, there is no plan to replace Gluster with Ceph. Ceph is just an addition to the current Gluster interface. So oVirt will have support for Gluster and Ceph in the future.
Okay, then the next question is, when can we expect to have thin disk backup restoration features? Currently, we can only restore as raw. Maybe Nir can answer that better if he has an answer to that.
I think that's a question for Nir, yes.
Nir, you are muted.
Yes, hi. Well, we support, of course, restoring in any format you want. There is no limit on the image format when you restore images.
So that might be some older version of oVirt. Next question for Martin, I believe. I've heard that Red Hat is fading out Rev, and they're talking about the roadmap as an OpenShift-based virtualization solution. So does Red Hat continue to serve as a main sponsor?
Well, Red Hat is still committed to oVirt at least until 2026. I mean, that's 5 years from now. I can't say anything beyond that, but until then, Red Hat will remain a sponsor and an active contributor to the oVirt project, of course.
Okay, I'll pick two more questions, and then we'll have to go over to Nir. Any plan to support Anthos, the Anthos solutions on top of the oVirt platform? No answers to that? Okay, I'm sorry we couldn't answer your question. Please post it to the oVirt users mailing list, and we'll get back to you there. Is it possible to support Pacemaker as a cluster software in oVirt? If it's not possible to port Pacemaker, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. If anyone has an answer, but
yeah,
this...
I think in a single sentence is a little bit difficult because there are two ways of using Pacemaker. Pacemaker as a cluster inside the guests, which is supported, fully supported. Pacemaker as a cluster software for the hypervisor, which is not supported. I think that's kind of the question. If you need more details, please go to the oVirt users mailing list, and we'll get to you in detail to these questions.
Okay, thank you very much for indeed a lot of questions. And with that, I'm handing over to Nir, who is a principal software engineer at Red Hat and working on the oVirt storage side of things. Nir, take it away.
Hi. So who I am? I'm working on a lot of fields on many free software projects. I started working on Moin maybe 18 years ago. And in the last 8 years, I'm working on oVirt storage. And I also contribute to other projects like QEMO, Sunlock, NBD, Kit, libnbd, and virt. My main focus in the latest years is image transfer and incremental backup. So I want to thank the oVirt organizers for inviting me here. I want to share stuff we worked on during the 4.4 release, and also what we plan for the next version of it 4.5. So first, we start with incremental backup, which is actually the most complex storage feature we had. First, when we introduced incremental backup in 2020, we discussed all the stuff that will work in the future and how we can go back to the future when everything works, and the future is here. Incremental backup is complete. libvirt supports it. It's version 7, and oVirt supports it since version 4.6. And there are several backup vendors working on incremental backup or already supporting it. And there are 2 talks today about it, and I'm very excited about it. So what's new in incremental backup? In the early versions, we had a lot of limitations. And first was being able to backup only online VMs. We removed this limit in oVirt 4.6, and now we can backup VM regardless of the power state it can be running or not. It's completely transparent to the backup application. The next feature is mixed backups. In the older versions, you can do only full backup or incremental backup. For example, if you had a raw disk for a VM, you cannot do incremental backup for this VM. Or if you had a typical 2 disk that can do incremental backup, but there was some issue with the checkpoint, the backup would fail. Now, when you start incremental backup, we report the type of backup that you can do for every disk, and you can start incremental backup, and in the same session, do both full backup for disks that cannot do incremental backup, like raw disk, or UCAP disk, which have some issue with the checkpoints. And if you have disks that can do incremental backups and everything is fine, you can do incremental backups. Everything in the same session without failures or special code. Another limitation was the way you had to work with checkpoints. Previously, we could remove only the oldest checkpoints, and to do a backup, you needed all the checkpoints created since the checkpoint you want to backup from. libvirt changed the way it works. And now every checkpoint contains all the information needed to do backup, and it does not depend on any other checkpoint. So now we can remove checkpoints, any checkpoint that you need to remove, and we can also remove checkpoints when the VM is running or not. We do not depend on libvirt for this. Integration with disk operations. Another limit was that if you took a backup and then you move a disk to another storage domain, you lost the backup history and you had to start over after that. Or if you deleted a snapshot, it would break the backup. And you had to start over again with full backup, which is much slower. Now everything just works when we when you do some disk operation, we preserve the checkpoint information in the disk, and you can continue to do incremental backups after that with no interruption. The next limitation was how we use sketch disk. When we create backups, we must create sketch disk for temporary data that the VM is writing to the disk during the backup. In the past, we used local files on the host, which is very easy to use from our side. But this could create issue if you don't have enough space on the local storage. Or maybe if your local storage is too slow, it can affect the VM performance. So now we create the sketch disk on the same storage used by the VM. So we'll get the same performance, and the amount of free space on the local host does not affect the backup. And finally, the last improvement that we had recently is zero support for incremental backup. It means that if you, for example, delete a lot of data from a disk and trim the disk, previously the backup had to copy all the trimmed area, which actually is read as zeros, because the backup application did not have any way to detect the zeros. And now we report, even for incremental backup, we report the dirty extents, and the backup can, if a backup is using this new API, it can skip the zero areas and make the incremental backup even faster. So next is managed block storage, which is the future of oVirt storage. But this is not complete yet. The future is not there yet for this. But we are adding feature all the time. The last feature added is being able to copy disks from traditional storage domain to managed storage domain. Or copy, or the other way around, to copy new VMs you created on managed block storage to older storage domains. Now, the work on incremental backup also improved the image transfer API. Now we have better support for backup vendors that still using snapshots to do backup. We have two ways to copy snapshots, to download snapshots. The first way is to transfer the contents of the disk at the time of the snapshot. This includes all the data from all snapshots from the snapshot you choose. This is similar to the full backup that you use using the incremental backup API. And the second way is to download a single snapshot, which is similar to incremental backup. You create a snapshot before the backup, you download only the data from this snapshot, and you can rebase this snapshot on the previous snapshot. And you keep this snapshot, and you will delete it on the next day after you create the next snapshot for the next incremental backup. And the last addition to the image transfer API is creating checksums. We now support disk checksums, which are very flexible. We support any image format. We support sparse images. And you can use it to verify disk operations, image transfers. For example, if you delete a snapshot, you can verify that the disk contents is match the disk before the snapshot delete. This is very useful mainly for testing of it. So what do we plan for oVirt 4.5? First, we want to support converting this format. This is very important for incremental backup. For example, if you have existing VM with all disk, it will be much better if you had convert this to QK2 format, because your first backup will be much smaller. So we want to support converting QK2 formats to raw disk to QK2 format. And on the other way, we can also support converting QK2 disk to raw format if for some reason you want to use the raw format. For example, maybe you want to get the best performance possible. So we want to support this first when the VM is not running, and later we will support also online conversion, which is similar to moving a disk to another storage domain. The next improvement is minimizing the size of the sketch disk. Currently, we use reallocated slash disk based on the current size of the disk. And this consumes a lot of storage space, which is not needed. This is the maximum size that may be needed. And we want to use thin disks that are extended automatically as needed. And finally, we want to enhance the Ceph support using the managed block storage. Managed block storage supports maybe 80 drivers, but we are focusing on Ceph. And we want to add missing features like moving disks. For example, we support copying disks, but we also support moving disk. And we want to integrate with image transfer API, so we'll be able to upload and download disk on the managed block storage. And then that's all for today. And if you have questions, please use the chat. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Nir.
Thanks.
And indeed, a lot of improvements over the last year, and a lot of new things to look forward to. And with that, we are a bit behind in time, so we'll jump straight to Karsten Wade. Karsten has been paramount to making oVirt what it is today. He is a senior community architect with Red Hat with the Open Source Programs Office, and was one of the lead community architects when oVirt went open source. Karsten, take it away.
All right, thank you. Let me just share my presentation. And I will go ahead and get things rolling. I'm making things complicated by running my own presentation, but it's going to make it smoother once we get there. I appreciate the opportunity to.
Karsten, can you speak up a little? I'm sorry, you're
sure,
a bit quiet.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm just was having that moment of trying to find the loss of the tab that didn't want to be found. You know how that is. So here we go.
Yes, indeed. And while Karsten is preparing his presentation, so the way this conference will work after this live stream will be automatically forwarded to the next talk, which is Sandro's perspective on the oVirt community in 2021. And you can, of course, ask questions from Sandro and any upcoming talk. If you lose track of which talk we're at, you can always go to the oVirt website and hit the oVirt conference banner, and you'll find a link to each and every talk there. So we're just gonna give Karsten a second to sort out his screen sharing, and
yeah,
there we go.
I figured out what it was. We were just in too many personal views. Okay, great. We will, and we're just going to resize this so that you can get that.
Enjoy it in its full glory.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
And please remember to speak up. Your microphone is a little quiet, and go ahead.
Great. Thank you. All right, everybody. Good day. I'm Karsten, or you may know me as Quaid, which is Q-U-A-I-D, and I'm one of the community architects who worked on open sourcing this project. And I'd just like to take you on a short journey through 10 years of open source principles at work, and through the lens of working with the oVirt project. And we'll take it from here. So first, let's just start by taking a moment and looking at the very base difference between the oVirt face to the world when you look back 10 years and you look for right now. There's a couple of things that are really obvious on the face of this in terms of how we've progressed as a project, and how the community has progressed, and how the work has been presented, and the focus on how to attract users. Both of these pages represent best practices of their time in terms of how you want to do a community website. So in 2011, the focus was on news, a lot of words, a lot of descriptions, and active social media all were on the top of the web page, or what we call like above the fold, as if this was a newspaper. And the workshop was below the fold, so buried a little bit, so not very prominent for such an important thing. That was the oVirt kickoff workshop in November of 2011. And the download button was also small and on the menu bar. But in 2021, the other calls to action are more in the center. The conference here is the top of the fold, and there's this large download area and even larger looking donate hardware area below. So you can see the differences. Oh, and we've returned to blue as the main color. So since we're looking, let's go ahead and see what happened during the green years. This was one of the permutations. As we go through, you can see there's lots of movement around the calls to action, the attention to users and contributors have moved to different locations. You can begin to see the increase in mentions of projects for collaboration, ability to always there to download the latest code, the ability to get the release notes has come in there, but along the way, very similar look and feel in terms of organization, different tooling on the back end, and of course, in here at the end, we bring ourselves back around to the blue. So being able to take a look at a community through its web presence and through its face like that is an important part of understanding, how it looks to the world. So that's how I'm going to continue to look through things here for you today. And so what was happening in 2011 that got me involved in this project, and why did I go? So I was working for this team, which is the community leadership team, and we had our roots in the Fedora project, including myself. We also worked on other efforts, including teaching open source, the opensource.com writing and getting that kicked off, and the project that I worked on the most, which was the open source way. And what this was an effort to capture community management best practices as we knew them best, get those into a handbook, work to get other people to read the book, use the book, and contribute to the book. Just make it something that's useful for more than just ourselves. So after we were out there, after this book was out there, and I've been talking about it for a little while, we were at a team multi-day offsite meeting, and a few extended members were with us, including Robin Bergeron, and we got a call from Carl Truloff asking if we wanted to help with the open sourcing of oVirt. And from my perspective, it was a fantastic opportunity to have a full hands-on experience applying the principles of the Open Source Way guidebook, to measure the success of those principles and to improve them, to see what could be better there, all within the context of an active open source project. And also give us an opportunity to adapt and to change these principles for different projects, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So we really worked to try them out again across the entire project, which was exciting to me because at that point I'd been working sort of piecemeal, giving suggestions and working with different parts of projects as like more in a consulting rather than applying the principles across an entire project. So it was a great opportunity. So I got started with Robin Bergeron of Fedora and Ansible fame, and we co-led as community architects for the open sourcing of the code base. This included providing infrastructure participation, such as the version control, websites, mailing lists, blogs, news, and social media. It also included finding speaking opportunities for other contributors and standing in front of audiences ourselves to pitch the oVirt project. We tapered off our involvement, and myself, I was pretty close to done near the end of 2012 in terms of my community management work. I continued to be involved with the infrastructure team for a few years after that because, well, you might know it's hard when there are a few keys only you know how to turn those keys over to other people. And one not so fun fact from back then, the first 3+ years of the project, we had several services that were running on a Linode instance, and Linode's a great company, but back then they only had Zen as an option for virtual machines. So for a while we were running a number of project pieces on not our hypervisor and not our favorite scenario setup. So that there is a good segue into a few things I want to talk to today around the principles of the open source way as they were applied in the early days and then evolved to the present in the oVirt project, and how sometimes you have to make decisions that moves you forward, such as using an open source solution that's not your open solution, but whatever the details were that made that the case, and then it became a running system, and then that's just the way it was, and then you have to move forward. So that's where this is. So the three areas that I wanted to touch upon are around governance and self-direction, the working to create some value from the code base, something that Martin was touching upon earlier, and then thinking about your contribution and as part of your CV, or as part of your resume. I'm going to see how we approached those things 10 years ago and then compare those to where we are today in terms of what I can see for the oVirt project and then the evolution of those underlying principles across the rest of the open source community. So in terms of governance, back then we adopted basically it was a recent model from that had been put out by the OpenStack community to organize a multi-organizational approach to running an open source project. And then we went and applied the open source principles as we understood them. A lot of those are here, were captured in the Open Source Way guidebook. And we just, just went through the list and started to do them one at a time all the way down. And today we understand a lot more, have a lot more of a managed or controlled approach in terms of how we do the Open Source Way. And in particular, like the governance, there's an entire chapter, one of the longest chapters in the book is on project and community governance, and it really details a number of different governance approaches. And just to help, so when a project is coming from the beginning, they're not creating it from scratch, which is a lot of what we were doing in oVirt back then. So in terms of creating value, this idea of what you can do with the code base to make money, to provide some value for you and whatever your organization is working on, or you as an individual, it's always been an important part of the project to have other people able to make products from it. It's more than just a sign of success that you're doing a good open source project when people are able to do that, but you also know that you've got people who are more committed to the code base and to the sustainability of the project. So the ways beyond product, ways to create this value can include creating products or creating managed services or integrated solutions, or having this be part of a research efforts. So you can see there's a lot of different ways and the kind of things that people are currently involved in and have been involved in for the project. Back in the past, we were essentially working on enabling that to happen, but we didn't really, all we could do is say good luck and, we think this is a good idea. These days, the approach is that there, for example, in the open source way, we have an entire chapter on creating an open source product strategy. And it's something that you can apply to either a new project like we would have back 10 years ago, or you can take an existing project and look at it again, run it through the same process and see how you would create value from it now that it's up and going. And then the last one I wanted to touch upon was this idea of contributor roles and the value that contributors have within an open source community, especially thinking about the contributions beyond code and also the contributor roles and the value they have to people in their career development. So one thing that I've really always appreciated, and maybe because I also had a hand in helping make it happen, but that oVirt is a project that has really worked to showcase and value the contributions of all kinds. This was an tenet that we wanted to see in place from the beginning, and it's a real key to turning users into contributors, making it so that people can see themselves contributing to the project, especially if they don't have a coding or technical capability. So the documentation on the website has always included a long list of things that people can do that are beyond working in a coding opportunity, and that has been true since the very early days and continues to be true up to now in terms of the how when people are offered the opportunity to get involved, they're really presented with a lot of different options like this, and this ties directly into the kind of material that we now have and how we recommended things. In the open source way, there's an entire chapter on community roles that describes how when people have different career development ideas, they can look at, say, for example, if they're interested in doing product marketing, how can they get product marketing skills working in an open source project? Well, it may or may not be obvious to you that that can be the case, but a person like Martin, for example, or someone else might be able to tell you of the extreme value that you can get out of that and what that's like and how that is compared to other ways of contributing. Yeah. Perfect. And I was just going to, and I will just stop right here and just add this as I'm coming to here. So here's just a quick flash of 10 years ago to today. 10 years ago on the left were the originally open source way, and the new website with all the different, the 2.0 guide that we released this year. And this presentation that I have here is also on our website if anybody wants to go and grab it for its notes. And that is all that I've got to say. So thank you for listening to my old timer stories today. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for all your contributions. And the next talk will be Sandro's community updates for 2021. And a tremendous multitasking going on. Sandro has been moderating the chat. Nir has been answering questions. So let's look forward to a lively discussions in the upcoming talks. Thank you everyone for watching, and you will be forwarded to the next video once this live stream ends. Thank you and goodbye.